Lauren Murphy. Now, we did talk about this on Monday, namely, like, should the corner have stopped it? And again, there were things that Daniel Cormier had said as part of the broadcast team that her corner didn't necessarily say, but we were just having a discussion, like, should it have been stopped? What are some of the arguments about it? Blah, blah, blah. She responded, BC. Yes, she did. Quote, she wrote a tweet about it. She says, all the podcasters and fans screeching about Lauren Murphy needs a new corner and they should throw in the towel. Now, in fairness to us, BC, I don't think you or I called for her to have a new corner. I don't think we did that.
We didn't.
And by the way, when she says all the podcasters and fans, it's like, dude, Cormier and Paul Felder and John Anik were the ones who brought them this up. Are you suggesting that they're podcasters? I mean, I guess that's technically true. They are.
Don't they all host their own podcast? Yeah,
they do. But it almost sounds like she's absolving them and like pointing the finger at like media and fans. I could be wrong about that. I don't know, but it just was unclear. Anyway, here's what she argues. Is anyone arguing that Glover Teixeira's corner should have stopped it? But yes, is the answer, like many people did. I saw him after the fights, and he looked way worse than me. We haven't seen her, so I don't know if that's true. Both his eyes are closed, and he took a lot of unanswered shots. True. What about when Brian Ortega got a boxing lesson in the middle of a fight against Max Holloway? That fight was stopped after the fourth. Look at Darren Elkins' entire career. It's a fist fight. Sometimes we get beat up. Sometimes it might make you uncomfortable. That is your problem. Where were these people when Joanna looked like effing Megamind in her fight with Zhang Weili? Plenty of people called for that to be stopped. If they're concerned for safety, why weren't they screaming for her to be pulled? Some were. Competitive or not, shouldn't her safety have come first? Missed me with that double standard BS. And she also goes on to say something kind of interesting, BC, which was that, you know, she's like, I signed up for this. I mean, I have a few responses and I'd like to get yours, but one of the things I want to make clear here is the government regulates this. The government cannot regulate any activity that anyone in theory would consent to. For example, you could not, even if people would consent to fighting to the death, the government does not have a compelling interest in regulating or allowing this kind of activity. You can't consent to something like that. It's not really allowed. So, and that's an exaggerated example that I'm trying to make here, but you get the point. Just because you consent doesn't mean that that consent allows it to be okay. There's a broader discussion about what kind of damage we allow and don't. Your consent to it is relevant only up to a point. But please, your response.
Thank you. I'm not too mad at her. I don't agree in general, but it seems, Luke, the big part of it, she's pouring her heart out, and I don't question her toughness at all. I mean, no, that's not part of this at all. And, you saw it, and they're saying, I am tough. We all think you're tough. That's not the question here. I don't even think it's necessarily a double standard, too, although I do think it's worth the conversation. Because the majority of MMA fans would be male compared to female, although there are a lot of female fans. Do we look at when female fighters are in trouble and want to be quicker to say stop it because that could be that could be my mother, my daughter, my wife, my father, whatever. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I just think in this case, Luke, based on her comments, she's like, when are you people going to be happy? Is that not enough for you? It's like, no, they're never going to be happy. Like, they're critics, whether they're fans who, you have to take what the fans say with a certain grain of salt, especially the aggressive ones. And on the flip side, also media too. I mean, to some degree, Luke, we are filling shows and I don't, what we say can be constructive criticism if a fighter ever wants to hear it, but should not be something a fighter is using as a something they're fighting against to try to make changes to show us. So in that regard, I didn't like the spirit of how Lauren wrote that, but it's an emotional response after the fact. I just disagree, Luke.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Lauren Murphy is very smart. I've over the years in covering her career and listening to her speak, I've come away very impressed by the things that she says by and large. And BC, you know this as well as I do. Everything that's gone right in her career, she's earned every inch of it. There's nothing she's ever gotten that she didn't have to earn the hard way, probably, right? I mean, very much as someone who has carved their own destiny and did it uphill. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for her. When she says what she says, I think she's being honest, and I don't think she's necessarily being unthoughtful. But fighters keep wanting to do this. This is the one thing I'm going to say. Fighters keep wanting to make this debate about what they want, and that what they want is really the ultimate arbiter of what is okay. It is not. It is not. Now, it is not to say that we don't care what they say. We care what fighters have to say a lot. In fact, of all the people who have voices, theirs might be the most important one. So for that reason, I encourage everyone to look at her full comments, pay attention to what she says. She's not in any way stupid. This is a very bright woman. However, BC, when we talk about rules about health and safety, we have to convince all of the stakeholders, the regulators, the promoters, the fighters, to an extent the fans, to an extent the media, the broader community. Those are the ones that largely shape the rules or some of the norms that end up creating some of the rules. It is not merely what the fighter either consents to or thinks is acceptable. That is not the ultimate arbiter. And we need to be, I think, fair to fighters. We need to hear them, and we need to be pay some deference to them, but not reflexive deference.
Well, they're too close to it. They're too close to the situation, and they're in control of a lot of that situation. But to me, it's no different. Like when you say, "Oh, you're a judge." Okay, you can't be the judge. You can't preside over the court case involving your nephew, right? You know what I mean? It's like, no, you're too close to it. And in this regard, it's like that's the case. But I think her argument just loses a lot of steam because her fight wasn't competitive at all, without the history of finishes like we've talked about. So in that regard, it wasn't a title fight in round 5, right? It wasn't. So there you go.
Okay, and by the way, BC, John Hackelman spoke to the MMA Hour talking about the Glover fight. He was in the corner. He said just a couple things very quickly that I thought were interesting. One, he says, quote, "I'm a known fight stopper in between rounds. I'm kind of known for that, maybe a little bit too much at times, but I thought this was a good time to stop it. I was outvoted in the corner." Kind of interesting. And then lastly, on Glover's retirement, win or lose, he would have retired, Hackelman said. He's ready. He's done enough. He's proved enough. I will say this. She was asking, like, who was talking about throwing in the towel in their corner? Who was throwing in who was talking about stopping the fight or throwing in the towel in the Glover fight? Turns out Glover's corner.
Yeah.
Turns out Glover's corner. Now, granted, it was a 5-round fight, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't hear anything from Lauren's corner, which, is a 3-round fight. Maybe you don't expect to necessarily, but there were some meaningful differences.
And Hack, of course, was there with Glover from the beginning in the camp with Liddell, but isn't his day-to-day coach now. And he said he was invited here as more of a ceremonial encouragement role. In fact, he revealed, as you read that tweet read the quote there, that Glover said one last ride was the quote. Come join my corner. This will be the last time. So Luke, the stuff about him retiring and should have been stopped. It could have been stopped easily after round 4, but I think we all saw how close Glover, who got full mount in round 5, actually was to potentially winning that fight, which is wild. But Luke, he win or lose, Glover Teixeira was going to pull the GSP, right? Give the lip service publicly of saying, "Don't worry, I won't retire. I'll defend it," blah, blah, blah. Our biggest fear entering this fight, Hill Teixeira, as the purity of being an MMA fan and respecting rankings and hierarchy is is the winner going to look like the best light heavyweight in the world, or are we going to feel like this is a mess because Blachowicz and Ankalaev drew, and then, we just panicked and went to the next 2 in line? I mean, who the hell's going to fight next for this, Luke? Darren Till? I mean, where are we going with this? We were rescued from that, I believe, by Jamal Hill having just such a breakthrough, amazing performance. But, dude, especially if Glover had won this in the dramatic come-from-behind way, dude, this is right. There's no chance he was. So look, he would have retired and left the belt right there. What would we have said after that? What would our reaction have been like?
Chaos. That would have been, I got to tell you, the UFC dodged a bullet with that one. They dodged a bullet. And I understand Glover's position completely. Like, if you took that beating and then you came back, you were already thinking about retiring anyway, you get it. Like, anything else after that, you are just courting disaster. You would have to stop. But that's terrible for the division. That's terrible for the UFC. Ooh, they got lucky. They got really unlucky with Magomed Ankalaev and Jan Blachowicz. They got really unlucky with that. But they got very lucky with Jamal Hill.
They would have had to go to Glover and be like, "What's the number? What's the
seriously
that you can build a new academy with this? You can, because what the best part about, quickly for Connecticut fans, about the embedded build up in the countdown show heading into this fight, we got to see Glover in his backyard. He has the plunge pool thing and he's got the hot tub. Luke, he lives in basically the same house I live in. It's like a, decent raised ranch. Yes. It's like he's just this regular dude in a neighborhood there in Greater Danbury, Connecticut. And we saw that come out in our room service diaries where it's like, we understand you have a superpower of badassery, but outside of that, you're just that dude who can come over and help me fix my lawnmower. That's literally him, Luke.
That's Glover. He lives comfortably, but you wouldn't say he lives extravagantly,
I don't think so.
He's just that dude.